Okay. Well, I think what we need to remember is that it's not very simple. So there's not one specific reason. We're seeing here in East Africa 4 or 5 reasons why this is currently happening. So number one is a conflict. Secondly, we would be having climate change problems, so drought. Then we have an unequal distribution of wealth. So we do have very rich people in some of the countries where we are, but then we have the extremely poor who don't have anything to eat. And then there's agricultural practices that are being done that aren't sustainable and aren't helpful for families. So if you want, I can elaborate a bit more on each of those. All right, so sure. The conflict that we're seeing is, for instance, in Somalia or South Sudan, 2 places with active, conflicts going on within the country. The problem is not necessarily that the food isn't there, it's that the food can't get to the markets. So I might, as a farmer, I might not be able to get seeds to sell my food, or sorry, to grow my food. I might not be able to sell my food because I can't get to the market, because the roads are blocked by fighting. It goes the same as if an international agency like World Vision is trying to get to those areas, we're blocked by the fighting and we can't reach the people who are extremely hungry and, in famine levels. And that's what we saw in South Sudan earlier this year. There's food being grown, but we couldn't get to the communities to give food, and the markets were empty because conflict was blocking access. So that's the first one. And then when we talk about the agricultural practices, I can tell you what I saw in Ethiopia recently. You have farmers who are engaging in monocropping, so it means they're relying on one specific crop. That's all they grow. And if that crop has a problem, they're done for the year. They don't have any food for themselves. They don't have any money. Often those crops are grown for export purposes, so they don't have any food to eat themselves. Sorry. Sorry. Um, the food is grown for export purposes a lot of the time. So, for instance, with coffee, the coffee harvest fails, and then we have a problem where nobody can uh, have anything to eat because they couldn't sell their coffee, because the rains didn't come or the market price was bad. So you can't eat coffee. You have to rely on what you're selling. And then the final one is just this. The land size is just too small. So you might have a garden that's the size of your living room in the United States, and that has to provide for your family of 6, and it's just not big enough. So you're stuck in poverty. You don't really get the opportunity to get yourself out of it. If I look at it from a global perspective, I'd have to say that it's an unequal distribution of wealth. We have more people in the world today who are overweight than underweight. Um, there is more than enough food that's being produced for everybody in the world, but it's not getting to people. Those are the problems that we're dealing with at a global scale. And within the countries we work to, we see it. There are rich people in the countries that we work in, um, who could be assisting but are not. There's companies that are wealthy who could be assisting but are not. Um, we're relying on oftentimes international aid to assist, to help solve the problem. We need governments to work together with us. We need governments to also be accountable, to the people and to the poorest people. Absolutely. Well, food waste, there's, two main reasons. So you have the problem in high income countries like the United States or Canada, where I'm from, and the problem is the food doesn't look good enough. It arrives at the market, it doesn't look good, they throw it out. They say, I can't eat it. So that's the first problem. Here in Africa, the problem is that it's not stored properly. So about 40% of the food that's grown in Africa never makes it to the mouths of people because it wasn't stored properly. It means that when they harvest the food, where they store it, it's infected with insects, it becomes moldy. It's just that there isn't a place where people have to store that properly, or they don't have the knowledge how to stop those things. So World Vision does a lot of work with farmers, where we teach them, here's some effective ways to store your harvest at a cheap way to do it, so that in the end they're earning more money from the sale of their food because they haven't lost as much. Uh, you, you've got many. You've got a burden on the national economy. You've got a burden on the national healthcare system. You've got people who are not economically productive. So there's those national burdens, and then there's the individual burdens of poor nutrition. We've got the problem, more than 6 million children in this part of the world are malnourished right now. That means they're not going to grow to their full potential. They're not going to develop to their full potential mentally, because malnutrition has an effect on your cognitive development. So you've got those issues that we're going to see. And then it's just the cycle of poverty. So people get stuck in this cycle of poverty. They can't make decisions that pull them out of it. So for instance, a family I met in Ethiopia recently, the parents didn't earn enough from their coffee harvest. They had to pull their children out of school. Those children will not be able to go back to school. And they will then have to repeat what their parents have done as well, because they don't get the opportunities that education offer you. They're going to be stuck in low wage jobs or relying on very small scale agriculture in the future. And we will see this problem continuing in the cycle forever if we don't take action. So I think really there is more that can be done. I think the problem can be turned around, but it takes really a global effort to do it. So, people who are wealthy, people who live in wealthy countries, there is a responsibility for us to also take action to support people, and for our governments to support people not only in our country but in other countries. And I think, at an individual level as well, there's a responsibility for us to say, yeah, I've got a great, life. What can I do to give back? Sure. All right. I don't like seeing myself on video.